This is the 20th season of Bass Talk Live. BTL is presented by Bass Cat Boats, Strike King Lures, Aftco, Pro Guide Batteries, Spro, Gamakatsu, The Bass Tank, Denali Rods, Beatdown Outdoors, and Sunline.
BTL coming at you.
Good morning, and welcome to another exciting edition of BTL, Bass Talk Live, where we are going to talk about bass fishing with the one and only Gene Gilliland, Bass Fishing Hall of Fame inductee, current conservation director of B.A.S.S, and longtime, what was your title in Oklahoma for all those years?
Well, I was research biologist for most of it, and then eventually assistant chief of fisheries, and that drove me into retirement. Sort of.
But now you just fish. You and your lovely bride have been catching big one. Like a lot of times I see her posting on social media a lot and with large bass, and they all look like they're like power fishing too.
Oh yeah.
Like I don't see many spinning rods in the Gilliland vessel. No,
it's chatterbaits and frogs and occasionally, I guess as finessey as we get is she really likes throwing a bubblegum Cinco. You know,
that's
so
finesse.
that's
wacky
kind of
rigged or Texas rigged?
Wacky.
Spinning rod or bait caster?
Bait caster.
Yeah, that still counts.
Yeah. I mean, it's on 30-pound braid. So,
yeah. Dude, that is a lost art. When I first moved to Oklahoma, I feel like the bright, like maybe it was just a Mark Jeffries thing, but like every post-spawn, like spawn, post-spawn, he was all about the pinks, the merthiolate worms.
Yeah.
Like, is that a thing that you think is I remember Randy Howell, I watched him throwing a merthiolate. You'll see it every once in a while. The guys will throw with the little kink in it still, but like that used to be like big in April and May, didn't it, in Oklahoma?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I think it is still. It's just kind of gotten out of fashion. I'm pretty sure that fish can still be caught on it if people would still throw it. But now people have kind of moved on to the latest and greatest.
You're a biologist. What is it about that? Do you think it's a color thing, or you think they catch just as many with green pumpkin? Did you ever do any research as to why a bold, bright color like that creates strikes more so than a natural color?
Not really. I think for the most part, it's a visibility thing. And depending on the water clarity and water color, I think that has a lot to do with it. When you get into the whole science of what colors that bass can see or cannot see, that sort of thing, there's a lot of it's kind of weird. It's a lot of gray area when you talk about colors.
They can see.
Yeah, what they can and can't see.
There's the title of the show.
Yeah, so it's but it I think a lot of it is it's like fashion trends is kind of the way I'd look at it. I think about Alan McGuckin called me the other day or sent me a text and was asking about the color fire tiger, which has been around for a while, and it's kind of fallen out of favor. It's not the hot color right now, but there's probably not many anglers that don't have a fire tiger bait in their box because it historically has been a really good color for catching fish under a lot of different conditions. But it's just not the flavor of the day.
I'm looking at an MLF article where Mark Daniels Jr. and Wheeler were throwing a pink trick worm early in the year, and they were talking about how it's so old school and they're bringing back the bright pink trick worm. I see an Alabama bass trail that was won on a merthiolate worm in 2018 on Lay Lake. Everyone used to have those things.
When we go up north, we're smallmouth fishing, we throw a that pink bubblegum fluke a lot. And I obviously smallmouth tend to respond, I think, to pinks and oranges and chartreuses and some of that kind of stuff. But bass down here do too. I can put on a black and blue Cinco and my wife will be throwing that bubblegum pink one, and she'll catch more fish than I will.
Because she knows how to twitch it.
That's it. She's got
the touch.
She's got the touch for it, and I'll put my black and blue one down, and I'll pick up a jig or a chatterbait or something like that. But she also has the patience to fish it the way you need to fish it. That I'm a little, I want to be cranking and winding a little bit more.
It is timely because we saw Patrick Walters and a number of guys at this past Lake Murray event, blueback herring, kind of the end of the spawn there, topwater. But we saw I noticed a lot of chartreuse in the flukes, a lot of the bright chartreuse baits. And that seems to be something that kind of goes in and out of favor too. Yeah. Like it used to be like real bright chartreuse, and then it went supernatural. Now it seems like that bold chartreuse, especially on those fast moving baits, is coming back.
Yeah.
I know some of the guys out in the Carolinas were not happy that was made, that was, brought to the forefront with with all the live coverage. So, yeah, but yeah, chartreuse.
It all goes around in circles.
It does. So you've been, we had you on, you came in studio, was it earlier this year?
Yeah,
it had to have been earlier this year. And then you were just on the bilge talking a lot about fish care with Trait and Chris. But when you were in studio here at BTL, basically we're not going to rehash the same stuff. You want to watch all about that, go watch the bilge. A lot of great information on there about the fish care. You want to talk about what's going on in the bass fishing world. First time you were here, you really did a good job of covering what Bass is doing technology wise, the whole 9 yards for the 2024 season. So there's those two big topics, but a topic that I know is near and dear to your heart, and we talk about it every single time, that's hard to generate excitement about, is the conservation, the grants, the summits, all that stuff. So the plan for the day is we're going to talk about that for the show. Then we're going to wrap it out. I'm going to throw the replay up, and then we're going to go catch some bass. How's that sound?
I like that idea. I like, especially the fishing part. Yeah.
Now here's the caveat. So Gene got, as always, on time. He got here a couple minutes early, and I was out filling around. It's actually the maiden voyage of the Puma STS. I got it from Cat, which I had to make another drive up to Bass Cat, which you pointed out to pick up the 30 rods that I left in there when I returned the first boat. But there's and you'll vouch for this right now on the Cat where we're going fishing, there's legitimately 6 rods in the boat, and there's 4 rods on the front deck. You have 2 spinning rods and I have 2 spinning rods, and we're going to do the Oklahoma power fishing with finesse tactics today. Something that you haven't done much of.
No, that's right. I have not done much of the little drop shotting and that sort of thing that I've done.
Some of the
has been chasing smallmouth.
You're not going to like it. Yeah. So this is going to be zzz, hopefully zzz, with largemouth.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm looking forward to it.
Over under. You want to put $5 on who catches the first keeper size largemouth out of the new boat?
Well, that wouldn't be fair because it's your boat. I mean,
I mean, it would be kind of cool to have a Hall of Famer catch the first bass out of my boat.
Well,
there's not many people that can say that.
You do it like the Pro-Am that Bass did at the Classic, where the boat captain, the pro,
can't catch one until
can't even catch a fish until the amateur catches one.
Awesome. With Hood fishing, winning it, fishing with Zaldane, but you had the Travis Pastrana fishing with Scott Martin. I boldly at that Classic walked up to Chase, and he's like, "How's it going?" And I'm sure Chase at one point would like someone who fishes just to be like, "Good, Chase, good to see you." But of course I launched into, "Oh, you got a monster on your hands with this Pro-Am. You guys need to dump all this money and resources. I want to see live. I want to watch it live next year down in Fort Worth. I want to see those guys across the stage." I thought that was a really cool event. And then you kind of saw it come out afterwards on some of the channels. I think Sydney Wells fished it. She came out with some Barstool Outdoors stuff for it. Like, it got a lot of publicity.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed watching that event.
Yeah.
From what I could see, like I said, I want it bigger and better. I talked to Brian Robinson, and he was like, "Yeah, no, bigger, better next year."
Well, it was the first one, Yeah. I mean, they've done a lot of these Pro-Am type events at a number of the elite tournaments where a particular sponsor brings in a group of VIPs, and they pair them up with some of our elite pros.
Yamaha Academy, all sorts of different, but it's more of a
but this deal was a little different animal, and certainly with the range of people that were involved in that was in terms of the different, they weren't all from the fishing community.
Wetzel.
Yeah. And so that really made it a cool event, I think. And I'm sure that the powers that be in Birmingham are really looking into, how they can make that bigger and better in the future.
Something like 3 to 5 million, just like social media, just those people that like aren't in the fishing, realm, the tournament realm specifically. It's ideal to get the people who are like, oh, I like to fish, and then here's my favorite celebrity that I've followed, and you get the Rock factor. You gotta get the Rock next year though. 100%. You gotta get the Rock, you gotta get Dion. You had Randy Moss already, but I mean, you get the Rock and the Dion to show up. But it's also, I mean, it's in Fort Worth. Like, how could they not come to that?
Right.
They have to be all in on that. Bass has got to. I mean,
well, we'll put.
Am I off base on that, Gene?
No.
I know you're the conservation guy, but I mean,
no, I think certainly that's, and I guarantee that there's people in Birmingham that are all over that, trying to figure out how to make that work, and take advantage of that first tournament and see if they can't make it bigger and better, and because it really does help expose tournament angling to a completely different audience. And it's like when you and Thomas Allen were talking the other day on BTL about how a relatively small percentage of anglers are involved in tournament fishing. Well, then you think about the fact that there's 55 million people in this country that fish, but that means there's 250 million that don't. And so but a lot of that 250 million are fans of a number of those people that were on that celebrity pro-am. And so if you kind of open the door a little bit to some of that 250 million people, at least let them say, hey, look, here's some cool stuff that's going on. Even if you're not a really big fan of fishing or of tournament fishing, it certainly gives them something to look at. And I think it's a great idea.
It is interesting when you talk about that. Like, I've had the opportunity to there's a picture right there. So see that picture right there, the St. Jude with the fish. So that's Gretchen Simon, who runs the St. Jude Dick Hiley Bass Classic. Ran it for a number of years, does a great job. All around fisherman, like, has to put up with just dirty, grimy tournament fishermen all week at the St. Jude, but has never caught a bass herself. Had never caught a bass herself.
Right.
So we went right out here to Shawnee Twin Lakes. When they came down, they were also at the Bassmaster Classic. I think they're going to be at ICAST, trying to work some stuff for St. Jude. And we got her on her first, that's a 2-pound, 9-ounce largemouth that she caught on a jerkbait. But I think you forget, like, you don't get the opportunity. The deeper you get, the more you get. You're with guys who fish all the time and not, but when you get in the boat with someone who's all about it, who's open-minded, who's excited, and they hook that first fish, like, dude, I think that's a feeling that you forget when you're in the tournament fishing, just how exciting it is to have something on the end of your line, to tug back, and then, to learn how to hold it and weigh it, and then get a picture and then release it and watch it swim off, and explain to her, hey, like, you could come back next year and that could be a 3-pounder that we could catch. But like, that's what it's all about. I think that In Fisherman kind of captures that, just the joy of like, I got something, and not having any expectation of it's a 1/4 inch too small. It's not big enough. There's not enough of them. It's just like, we caught that one fish, and that was like a very successful trip. And just to see that excitement was like worth it for me.
Yeah. It's, it's, I think a lot of people that have been involved in fishing, especially kind of focus more on the tournament aspects, kind of forget some of their beginnings. And, you think back to what got you started. It was that first tug, that first fish that kind of lit a little bit of a fire. And when you see that in somebody who hasn't experienced it before, it's a pretty cool feeling.
It is. We mentioned the Classic and the Pro-Am that went on there. One of the other things that went on is it annual or semi-annual, the summit that you have
every other year,
the semi-annual. And when you're here the first time, you talked a little bit about what it was, but kind of recap that, and then what actually went on, why that's important to the sport where we are right now in 2024. And then after that, we'll dive into some really cool things that are going on with the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame currently and then in the upcoming months.
Okay. Well, the Bass Conservation Summit, we hold it every other year at the Bassmaster Classic. And what we do is within the Bass Nation, our state chapters, each of the state chapters has a state conservation director who is a volunteer. It's a bass angler who just cares a little bit more about the environment and the conservation of the resource, that sort of thing. And we invite all of them to come to the Classic every other year for what we call our Conservation Summit. And we also invite the State Fish and Wildlife Agency. The invitation goes out to the fisheries chief, the head guy over the fisheries, or gal in some cases, in whatever state. Now, sometimes the fish chief comes, sometimes they send the black bass biologist or warm water biologist, depending on how their state is structured. But we usually wind up with about 35 or so of the states that are able to send people. This year we had right at 100 participants.
Just had pulled up some of the pictures from the summit that were on Bassmaster.
And it's we've been doing this literally for decades. Bass has been very involved in trying to engage with state and federal fisheries management agencies and connect our state bass clubs and state chapters within the Bass Nation and get them connected with their state fish and wildlife agencies, so that you kind of build a partnership between the bass fishermen and the biologists and the people that are managing those fisheries. So every other year we come together and we put together a program, an agenda of kind of current topics and things that are of concern to the fishermen and that are concern to the biologists. And we spend 2 days basically having presentations and discussions about all of those hot topics. And it's, over the years, it has really been a great way to like I say, make connections to where the biologists find out, okay, who are the people within the state that I need to work with? And the state conservation directors, the Bass Nation guys, start to build a relationship with the biologists, so that we're not butting heads. You know, we want to try to, we figure out what are our problems and how can we work together to come up with solutions, things that will make fishing better for everyone. And it's been a very successful meetings over the years, and it has led to any number of things. I give you a quick example. Several years back, we had never had anybody from Michigan come from the state fish and game, from DNR, the DNR in Michigan. And their fish chief came down. I think we were in Birmingham that year. And he got to not only talk with the anglers, but he also got to talk with other fish chiefs from around the country who were from states where bass fishing is maybe a little higher priority. And I think he realized that, you know, that we need to do more for the bass fishing community. And so when he got back home, he actually assigned one of his biologists to try to set up a program to find out just how many bass tournaments were going on in Michigan, because they didn't have any idea. You know, they'd spent most of their time and energy on, you know, walleye and perch and salmon and trout and stuff like that. And the bass fisheries, especially in a lot of the northern states, kind of been on autopilot, what I call it. The The states really didn't do a lot of active management of those fisheries. And they didn't have any idea how many bass tournaments were going on out there. And as it turned out, when they got this registration system built, they found out there was like 1,800 tournaments a year in Michigan. And they didn't have any idea that it was that big a deal. Well, now they do. And that was kind of a result of that fish chief coming to our summit that year and sparked a little idea in his head that said, we need to look into this more. And so now there's, they're building on that. And so there's little things like that have happened over the years that's really made it worthwhile. I think I've always kind of jokingly said that when it comes to BASS, B.A.S.S, the company, I'm a liability, and the conservation program is a liability. And by that, I mean, we spend money. We don't make them money. Mm-hmm. It's not like we get tournament entry fees. We don't sell sponsorships or advertising, that sort of stuff. And so this conservation summit, it isn't cheap. We put on this event at the Classic. Basically all the people that are coming to it just have to do is just get there, because we pay for their lodging. We pay for most of their meals. We just want them to get there. So we're not generating revenue from this, but in the long haul, the powers that be at BASS and the owners going all the way back have understood that if we don't have healthy fisheries and quality bass fishing, they don't have a business. Mm-hmm. Because the business depends on the resource being there. And so they've always understood that the conservation side of things is important, even though it's not a money-making part of the business.
I feel like it is. I feel like that's part of the reason why I'm a member of BASS, because it encompasses not only the fact that I can fish tournaments, not only the fact that I'm learning from the magazine and the material that you're putting out, but because it also is a part of that. Hey, I'm a part of this where we care about our fisheries and we're managing them and we're working with them. So like, to me, that is a part of why I'm paying. Well, I mean, I've been a life member since I was 13, but that is one of the main reasons why some people are, because that's a part of it.
Sure. And I think that's something I think we BASS need to tell that story a little more, because I think a lot of the angling public sees BASS as a tournament organization, and we really are so much more. This conservation summit is just one of many things that we do on the conservation side of things, and that story doesn't always get out there to the mass media as much as it could mm-hmm. or should. But yeah, I think there are a lot of people that joined BASS over the years because they wanted to be part of something bigger, something better, and to help make things better.
And that's why we used to talk about seeing the BASS shield on some other guy's truck randomly and knowing what that guy kind of stood for.
Right. And so I think, we certainly want to try to encourage that and bring that feeling back that BASS is more than just a tournament organization. We're about getting youth involved. We want to get kids involved in fishing. We want to get more people involved in the sport of fishing. And all of that is based on a healthy resource mm-hmm. and making sure that our water's clean and that we have healthy fisheries and good populations of fish for people to catch.
So this summit, what would you say are the most BASS friendliest states? Like, if you had to list, is that a fair question, Gene, to say like the top 5 states that you think are like, hey, from what I've seen, we have a great relationship with this. They do a great job with tournaments. They do a great job of listening to the anglers from facilities and conservation. They're actively involved in it. Like mm-hmm. if we were to have kind of this style in all 50 states, we'd be really well off.
The only way I can answer that is to really upset a bunch of the other states.
I know that. That's why I ask, is it a fair question? Because I wrote down a couple states. Like, obviously the first ones that hop to my mind are like Texas and Alabama.
Yeah, there's the problem with coming up with a straight answer for that is every state has different resources to work with. And it's not just the management style or the philosophy within a state agency. Some of them may be very bass friendly, but they may not have the resources to work with.
Okay.
And by resources, I mean not only just the water, they may not have the funding. They want to do more, but maybe they can't. So that's a challenge. Texas always gets brought up, and obviously Texas has tremendous amount of resources in terms of the number of lakes they've got. There's hundreds and hundreds of lakes across the state, and they have done a lot of work on managing those fisheries for not just bass, but for other species as well. And they are a very bass friendly agency, and they've done a lot of great things. But I used to always, when working for Oklahoma, we always got compared to them, and I used to throw out part of the problem in Oklahoma was, we got quite a few lakes, but we don't have a lot of people, so we don't have a lot of money from license sales and that sort of thing to be able to do a lot of the things that they can do. There are more fishing license buyers than there are people in Oklahoma.
More fishing license buyers in Texas.
More license buyers in Texas than there are people in Oklahoma.
That makes sense.
And so the economics is way different. Plus the fact that they've got so many lakes. But you take a say a smaller state. Arkansas is one that comes to mind. They are very tournament friendly. They've done a lot of work trying to interact with bass anglers and tournament anglers. They've built tournament weigh-in facilities at a number of their lakes around the state. They've really recognized that part of their license buying public that they really want to try to focus on. And so they've done a lot of good stuff. South Carolina is another one that has some really good. Tennessee has a really good program. They've got a lot of good biologists that are really tuned into the bass fishing community and work very well with a lot of the volunteer organizations and like with our Bass Nation, that sort of thing, and habitat projects and stuff like that. It like I say, it just varies across the country. There's places where I think the desire is there to do more, but there's either political or economic constraints in a lot of places.
Is there a pushback from anglers? I know there's been some. This is Bass Club anglers talking right now, like Assumption Bass Club guys. You used to be able to go out, have your tournament, set up your basket, put your fish in the basket, throw them back, pay out your first, second, third, and big bass, go on with your life. Then the state agency gets involved. Now you have to register your tournament. Then they want to know everything you're catching. Then they throw a ramp fee on top of it. Now they're limiting the tournaments. Now they're taking a percentage of the tournaments if it's over X amount of winnings that you have to get taxed on instead of cash. And the guys, I hear them. The guys have been in the club for 30 years are sitting there going, what the hell, man? We used to be able to have a tournament, and now we're getting taxed, and we can't go to this lake, and we have to report how many fish are on, and it's just a nightmare for them. I know Terry Brown's written about it a bunch in the Bloomington newspaper.
Right.
That's a question where all this sounds good, but then there's a whole bunch of people that are like, just let us go catch our fish. So why is it important to actually kind of get this on the radar of these instead of just let us do our own thing and move on?
Well, there are different political situations in every state.
Yeah.
And the demands on the state agency to manage those fisheries, it's not just managing fish, it's managing people. And, we saw this a lot during the pandemic, where we had so many more people coming to our lakes and fishing because they couldn't do anything else. the crowds, the crowding, the interference, all of that sort of thing really sort of came to a head. And in a lot of cases, somebody higher up the food chain, or even maybe depending on how those agencies are structured, somebody that doesn't have anything to do with fishing is saying your agency needs to bring in more revenue. And, the biologist who's managing Lake XYZ here, he just wants to manage the fish and make the fishing as good as he can for as many people as possible. But he's also got to deal with not just the bass fishermen, but the people that are fishing for crappie and walleye and muskie,
sawguy,
catfish,
bluegill,
all those other species. And, like we've said on here before, the percentage of anglers that are actually bass tournament anglers is a very small percentage. Probably in most states, I would say it's probably less than 10%.
Wow.
The only study that I ever saw that really kind of quantified that showed that a high percentage of licensed buyers who fish tournaments was like 25%.
I will say, like, even when we were up north fishing and stuff, like, yeah, there were a couple bass fishermen, but the vast majority, like, we're not in bass boats targeting bass.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you just think about any lake anywhere, there may be people in bass boats, but they may not be tournament anglers.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service does a survey every 5 years, and the most recent one of those showed that for the first time, maybe ever, the percentage of anglers that say that bass is their preferred species,
identify as a bass angler,
is less than 50%. Historically, bass has been the most popular sport fish in the country, and they still are in terms of total numbers, but slightly less than 50% of the anglers now say they are bass anglers. And so, if you're a state agency out there and you're trying to manage for all these people that are buying fishing licenses, it's a juggling act.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes it really tough to try to figure out, okay, how much money, how much time, we only have so many dollars to work with. How do we make this work so that it's as equitable for all of those other people as we can make it? And that's really, really tough. And in, like I say, in some states, the politics is such that there are other forces at work besides the biology, and that's the way it is in some places.
So this summit, we could go on for hours about each day, but it was kind of multi-days. You had Chris Horton come in, you spoke, a number of people spoke, but it seems like there were kind of three main concepts for the day, just kind of based on the article, which was which was like the state and federal legislation and that whole thing. But then there was also fish care and tournament care kind of day and thing, and that's kind of what you went into on the bilge with Chris and Trey. And then then there was also one on technology. So is that kind of how you would say it kind of broke down to where you're covering all what seems to be kind of the hot topics that seem to keep coming up coast to coast?
The fish care thing is something we wanted to just update everybody on the latest research. There's so much misinformation out there on how to take care of fish during tournaments. We wanted to try to get that lined out a little bit better so that everybody understood what the latest science shows, and try to make that available. In fact, we're still working with trying to get some videos and stuff.
You see that right there,
to get on.
Look underneath right there. There's my little B.A.S.S fish care deal with the needle and the lesson on how to fizz it and all that. And I've got it here. Pull that out.
Yeah.
Like that. See, I got the whole
Barb's Best Fizz Kit.
I got the whole fizz kit and the pack there, the education. Then I also have one in the boat. I've done it on the spotted bass and the smallmouth and the largemouth.
There you go. Well, we spend a little bit of time on that whole issue and looking at tournament mortality and whether or not that's a real problem or if, in most cases it's social problem more than it is a biological problem. But if people want to dive into that, they can get on that podcast I did with Chris and Trait, and we spent an hour and a half talking about that sort of thing. The political side of it, that other one of those three topics, is, again, that's something that's different in every state. But there are some things that pop up that potentially could affect everybody. For example, there seems to be a growing trend to try to ban lead fishing tackle, lead sinkers and lead jigs and anything made with lead, because there's a group that has deemed lead to be bad no matter what the context. And even though right now that's only in certain states, that's the kind of thing that could spread. And so we want to make sure all of our folks are aware of those issues. So, because me being I am the entire conservation department for B.A.S.S. It's just one guy. I can't hardly keep track of everything going on in every state. So our state Bass Nation chapters and our partners like Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation and American Sport Fishing Association, those are kind of the watchdogs. They're going to keep track on these political issues that are going on in the various states. And when something bubbles up that we need to be on top of, then that's when we try to mobilize all of our membership to, write your congressman, that sort of thing. So that was one of the components. We always try to make sure everybody's up to speed on that. The third thing you mentioned was the technology thing, and that was kind of a broad topic. We didn't focus specifically on forward-facing sonar and that sort of thing.
Just technology.
It was technology in general, and what the feeling is among the state agencies, where they're going with that, what kind of research is already started now to look at potential impacts from the technology, and whether or not that's something that there needs to be a concern with. It's so early in that process that we didn't have, there was a couple of the presentations that had some results of some surveys and that sort of thing, but it's still very, very early in that process to really know where that's all going.
Give us a timeline. We've heard about this for I feel like it's been 2 years now, but as a biologist, to actually, I'm going to use the wrong terminology here, sample size studies to definitively say this is or this is not or what is actually happening. Like, how many years to actually get a good picture of what is happening in anything, not just in forward-facing sonar. Take any fish study in general.
Well, that for the most part, you can get a fair picture of what's going on in a couple of years.
Okay.
And the problem you run into is that fish populations change. They're very dynamic. The numbers go up and down.
Yeah, look at Grand. Like, if the same thing had happened to Grand, so like when 110 boats in 2012 weighed in a 20-pound bag in May, and then 2 years later it took 18, and everyone's like, what happened? If think about that. Oh my gosh. If forward-facing sonar had been on that, they'd have said, oh, they were only catching with that. And then look, all those fish are gone because of that. But that was like a natural cycle of high water and good spawns and all sorts of stuff. And then those fish cycled out.
And again, that's going to be different parts of the country,
that's
different
a hard
lakes.
Thing to,
it makes a huge difference. And that's why every lake really is almost has to be managed on its own merits, because the rules that you put in effect for one lake may not fit the population on another lake. And so that makes it very difficult to kind of come up with blanket regulations, or even come up with a study that says, well, this is how it really is, because there's so much variability from lake to lake to lake. But if you do several years worth of study, you hope that you kind of hit the peaks and the valleys, and you've covered enough of the range of what happens on a given body of water. Now, the other thing that plays into this, though, is yes, the fish populations go up and down and sideways, and depending a lot on weather and water levels and amount of vegetation and just all sorts of things. But the participation among anglers is changing. So, we had that huge spike in fishing participation during the COVID.
Yep.
And then it went way back down. People went back to work. And so license sales dropped back off. They're creeping back up a little bit now, but we're certainly not near what we were. You go back into the late 90s, early 2000s, we're nowhere near the number of fishing license being sold now than what we were back then. But as those numbers change with participation, number of people on the water, the use of technology is obviously going to change as well. And so it's a moving target. When the biologists are trying to figure out, well, is this technique or this technology going to have an impact? All they can do is say, right now, what happens 5 years from now? And so that's what makes it a real challenge from the biologist side, is that they are chasing that moving target, and they're going to have to try to figure out as more and more of the technology is adopted, prices go down, more people use it, not just in the tournament world. Then how is that going to impact our fisheries? I think the state fish and wildlife agencies are on top of this right now. In fact, next week, there will be a call or a webinar, I guess it is, where all of the state fish and wildlife agencies, the fish chiefs, have been invited to sit in and talk about technology and where it's going and what their states are doing to look into this situation and see if there's the potential that they need to do something in terms of studying it and figure out where we're going with it. It's kind of a starting place. There are already several states that have started doing surveys on their own to find out who's using technology, how it's affecting the catch rate of various species of fish.
What does it say? The Texas Parks and Wildlife said that 47% of black bass anglers were already using new technology. I had that highlighted, pulled up on the screen. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and they surveyed, they do regular creel surveys every year on a lot of their lakes. And
you also have to figure out when you're going to be. If you're out there during a bass tournament and you survey it, then it's 100%.
Well,
if you're out there on a week,
the surveys. A creel survey goes for months and months and months.
I got you.
Okay, it's not a one-day thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so they get on a lake and they're interviewing anglers over a long period of time.
So is this the same thing like on Oneida, where you get off the water and that person comes up with the clipboard and goes, "Hey, what were you fishing for today?
Right.
Did you catch any? How many did you catch? What did you catch them on? Did you keep anything?"
Right.
And we're like, "What are you trying to get at?" But they're literally just trying to get a picture over time of what the people on Oneida are fishing for, so they can manage the fish.
There's two components when you're talking about fish management. The biologist can go out and set nets or do electrofishing or whatever, and they get a feel for the fish population. How many fish, how many size, how big they are, how fast they're growing, all that kind of stuff. The other side of it is how many are getting caught. Okay, the fishing side, not just the fishery side, the fishing side of how many people are catching, what species they're catching, what are they targeting, what are they keeping, those sort of numbers. So what several states, Texas being one of them, did was in these surveys that they do every year, the last couple of years, they added a couple of questions that said, are you using forward-facing sonar? And then they could go back and compare the number of fish caught, the number of fish kept, the species, whatever, with the people that said yes or no to using the technology. And that's where they, on the lakes that they surveyed, that they did this, I want to say it was like 13 different lakes around the state, that 47 whatever % of the bass anglers were already using the technology. Now, give that 2 or 3 more years, who knows? That could be 60%. I don't know which way that's going, because again, they just, this is kind of a snapshot. If they did that study again next year or 2 years or 3 years down the road,
situation right now, because it's changing. Gosh, you guys covered a lot in this thing, because then you did a whole stocking thing, and that's another controversy in and of itself.
Yeah, we had. There's been a huge cry over the last several years for stocking what's called the F1 largemouth bass, which is the hybrid between Florida bass and the northern largemouth.
They're kind of fun. And
several states are experimenting with stocking those fish now. We've over the years, a lot of research has shown that pure Florida bass don't survive very well as you move north. And Oklahoma being one of those places where there's parts of our state where they just don't survive. The F1 hybrid tends to be a little bit more tolerant of cold weather. And you still have some of that growth potential of the Florida bass. So you get a fish that potentially lives better in cooler, colder climates.
Still gets big.
And still gets big. Trophy size fish, if you want to call it that. So there's several states that are experimenting with stocking these fish kind of in what I would call fringe areas, places where the Florida bass have not proven to be successful.
Like right around where we're doing this podcast is a perfect example of, someone just said on here, the I-40. I-40 is the Florida straight line, correct?
It's
in a roundabout way, but you want to talk about fringe areas. I mean, we're a couple miles from I-40 right here.
Yeah. And so the Oklahoma Wildlife has stocked them in Grand Lake. There's a program in North Carolina. There's a program in Virginia. Now, in some of those states, Tennessee stocked a few. There's the downsides we don't really know yet, because these are if your goal is to produce trophy bass, it takes a while. And so how well those programs work, we don't know yet. But the some of the states, especially on the East Coast, there's parts of North and South Carolina and even up into Virginia where naturally there are fish that had Florida genes.
It's like the James River, like in the Chickahominy on the James, where we're seeing so many. I mean, like you see 8 to 10 pounders, and you're like, what are these giants doing in this tidal?
Virginia's been stocking these F1s for several years, but part of the reason that they justified stocking them was it's not like they're introducing some exotic species, because the Florida genes are already there.
Okay.
And so now where you get into the question marks is if you're stocking Florida bass, which are completely not native to a certain part of the country, does that ecologically upset things down the road somewhere? And you wind up with a bunch of mutt fish that really don't do what you wanted them to do to begin with. So, the anglers for decades have always thought that, stocking bass was the fix. Whenever fishing is bad, all you got to do is stock more fish. And we found out with study after study after study that for the most part, stocking bass into existing fish populations doesn't make fishing better. Now, people say, well, look at all the Bass Texas stocks. Well, what they're doing is influencing the genetic makeup of the population. If Texas puts in 100,000 Florida bass fingerlings into Sam Rayburn, a very tiny percentage of those fish survive to begin with because they're stocking them when they're this big. But nature says the fish bowl can only hold so many pounds of fish. So if you put in 100,000 of these little guys and some of them survive, that means some of the native spawned fish are going to die out because nature balances it out for you. So you're not adding more fish to the population. What you're doing is putting fish in there that potentially have the chance of growing to larger size. So the clamor for stocking more bass just doesn't work in a lot of places because nature has basically said, look, the carrying capacity of this body of water is this many pounds of fish per acre. And I don't care how many you try to stock in here. If the native bass aren't spawning well enough, if the little guys that are spawned naturally aren't surviving, maybe the habitat's no good, maybe the forage isn't right, there's something wrong. You come along and try to stock a bunch of fish, the same bad things that happen to the native spawn fish are going to happen to the ones you stock.
So here's what it comes down to. Like if you're a bass angler, you're passionate, we'll just use any particular body of water that is managed by a state agency. And your best bet is to understand the dynamics of your fishery from a political standpoint, where the dollars are coming in, from ecological standpoint, from a water quality and all of that. And then, so like if I want to learn about, let's just say I really was passionate about Texoma. Instead of hammering, let's use grand. Instead of saying, let's put smallmouth in grand, which has been the bane of your existence for what, 30 years?
Yeah.
If you really care about grand and understand what's going on, it's not like, I mean, it would be exciting to some people, but you have to understand a bunch of different factors in order then to figure out what you could actually do as a conscious, concerned angler to push to make it better. It's not just stock this, get rid of the hybrids, put smallmouth in here. That right. You have to understand that everything affects everything else and then figure out where the dynamics are that you can then focus your attention, your dollars, your time, your pressure towards to make it better as a whole.
Right.
Which takes time and energy.
Sure.
And a lot of people are not willing to do that.
You got to overcome that apathy.
Yeah.
Bass anglers in general tend to be very reactive.
Yep.
Rather than proactive. So they wait until something bad happens before they decide to act. But
I also think there's just a lot of, you don't know that anything bad's happening until it happens. And then you're like, whoa, wait, what? Yeah, hybrids?
Right.
Hybrids? Really? We're going with hybrids?
Yeah.
And then they figure it, then you get pissed about it.
And I think when one of the things that one of the little catchphrases that we've always used within bass conservation is that as bass anglers, we want to have a seat at the table.
Yep.
And by that, we mean when decisions are being made about how to manage a body of water, whether it's the biological decisions or the political decisions, we want to make sure that the bass anglers are represented at the table when those discussions are being had, and that the needs and wants of our group, our being the bass anglers, are fairly considered along with all of the other groups that are looking to have their voices heard. But if we're not there, if we're not at the table, then our needs and wants don't see the light of day and are either dismissed or just not considered in those decisions. And I'll give you a perfect example of how that can happen. Several months back, one of the water management districts in Florida had a public meeting to talk about chemical treatments to kill some hydrilla in a lake. And they put out, since it's a government agency, they have to put out these notices of, when the meeting is and where it is and all that kind of stuff. And this is a pretty important bass fishery that's really done well in the last several years. And the proposal was to come in there and basically kill all the hydrilla. And so they put out the meeting announcements, and three bass fishermen showed up. That's it. And there was dozens and dozens of other people that wanted to get rid of the hydrilla because they don't like it for whatever reason. Or there's any number of reasons, but the bass fishing community didn't respond. And so their voices just got drowned out. So in places where there are decisions being made to manage a fishery, we got to get people involved.
I've seen some stuff, like I see some stuff come across social media about a lake like in California where it's like, hey, if you want to be able to fish this lake in January ever again, like you need to get involved in this meeting. I know that there was like a petition for some stuff up for some lake out the Northeast. There was something about a lake. Like I've seen like some of it to where, as brutal as you could say social media is, it also does allow someone to go, hey, this is what's happening, and mobilize very quickly.
Well, and that's one of the things we really have tried to do, either through my little bass conservation Facebook group or now more and more on our Bassmasters social media pages, or the website for that matter, is when there are calls to action, when there is a meeting that we need to get people to, we'll try to get that information out there to them in a timely manner to, dates and times and locations like that. But people still got to take the initiative to go. And, I got to wash my dog, I can't go today. There's some excuse. And then when bad things happen as a result of decisions that are made at those meetings, then they get back on social media and bitch and moan and complain about it when they had an opportunity to get in there and have their say, but they didn't take advantage.
Okay, if I want to know what's going on, so this is like let's say we're watching this and you're like, yeah, I want to make sure I stayed up. Like, where do I go to find out like if something's going to be happening at Grand? Like, how is it? Where do I know? Like, how do I go and find, like, if I'm in a different state, to be like, yeah, I wonder if there's anything that's going to be discussed that I might be able to get involved with or pertaining to? Can you go to how do you find out about it before it is too late is what I guess my question is, to be proactive, like you said, instead of reactive.
For those big picture issues, the federal side, when you're looking about nationwide kind of stuff, the American Sport Fishing Association has a website called Keep America Fishing. And they put out action alerts all the time on all sorts of different fisheries issues. I mean, it may be saltwater stuff, maybe freshwater. It's not bass specific, but they keep a really good tab on a lot of things. And that's one of the places that you can go. I would also say that you really need to be plugged in to your state's Fish and Wildlife Agency's social media. And in our case, Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation has a Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and the whole 9 yards. Go ahead and follow those pages at the local level or on your state level. And then break it down a little bit further. You say, okay, Grand Lake. Chances are the Grand Lake Association probably has a Facebook page. If you will follow that, then occasionally, there's going to be notices when the city council or the county or somebody is having some discussion about something. There will be people post stuff on those pages that you need to follow and put it on your calendar.
So same things. City of Norman, Lake Thunderbird, whatever it is, whatever your lake is or county or whatever. It doesn't have to be a big one, but if you have a small lake, there'll be like a notice to address the address the water quality in Lake W.
Right.
And you're like, well, that, I fish the Tuesday nighter every night of Lake W, but there's some homeowners that are like, hey man, like this milfoil is out of control in here. And you're going, well, I mean, this milfoil is why it takes 15 pounds to win every Tuesday night. And it's just a little bulletin and boom. So now you're not even on a massive one, but you're also taking it. Yep. You're taking care of your fisher, and your voice is being heard on your 1,500 acre, 3,000 acre lake too.
And a lot of times the cities, the municipalities are the ones that have
the notices,
have control over a lot of those things. They may have to get permits from the state to do this or that, but ultimately a lot of times the city or the county is the one that has the ultimate authority to manage some of those things that go on those things.
Because that's what bothers me. You come in, you talk about this stuff. It's a rah, yeah, we need to be about this, but it's like, where's the actual micro where you can say, okay, right now, as soon as this BTL is over, I'm going to follow these accounts. I'm going to keep my eye on this, and I'm going to make sure that this doesn't happen to where I'm reactive instead of proactive. And then if it happens on that level and everything, then it kind of just snowballs. You have a bunch of people that are conscious and aware that know how it works on a micro level that can then impact how it works on a macro level.
And one thing I would really encourage people to do, I manage the B.A.S.S conservation Facebook group, and people will submit posts to that about things going on their lake or in their area. And if it's a call to action, then I will go ahead and approve those posts. And I mean, we don't have but a few thousand followers, but what I'll do is if it's a big deal, I'll forward that to the Bassmaster social media person who handles our Bassmaster account for Instagram and Facebook that has hundreds of thousands of followers, for them to post to try to spread that information out. And the other thing that we can do is if there's a call to action for, let's say, people in New Hampshire, they can send out a targeted Facebook post or Instagram post just to people in that state.
There you go.
So that somebody in Oregon who could care less about what's going on in New Hampshire doesn't have to have this stuff show up on their social media feeds, but it targets those people. So if people will send me things that are going on, then I can try to circle it around. So there it is.
That's actually what you can do in the 10 minutes after the show is over.
That's the way social media is supposed to work. It's supposed to be a network.
You're supposed to bitch on there, Gene. I like it. Hey, let's take a break. We're an hour into this. We haven't even gotten into the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame grants and all that. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll dive into that. Does that sound good?
You bet.
All right. BTL on a Tuesday. Gene Gilliland will be back right after this.
Your early morning mentality is your every hour mentality. All gas, no brakes. Focus, purpose, power. Destined for the water, but confident everywhere else. A calming buzz before the storm, truth of nature itself. You can't catch lightning in a bottle. There's a limit out there, but it's not with your gear. Unrelenting power delivery. Unparalleled weight savings. Keeping you on the water, whether you run a 9.9 or outscoping your best 5. In this rare air, there's power in the silence. It's a mindset, thinking only of the things that matter and freeing your mind from the things that you trust.
Get the best patterns backed by tournament data. Start by finding the best 10% of your lake. Know exactly what to look for and what to throw. After that, just put them in the boat. Try the Deep Dive app today.
The new Puma STS has been redesigned from the ground up. With the angler, design, function, and performance in mind, nothing on this new offering was compromised, and the only thing carried over from the previous version is the name. Based on the Soft Touch series hull that started with the flagship Jaguar, this new model is nimble and performs incredibly well at all speeds with either a 250 or 300 horsepower engine. Featuring a new 96-inch wide body footprint, this hull measures out at 20 foot 7 inches in length. Industry-leading design coupled with tournament-winning performance. The Puma STS from B.A.S.S. Feel the rush.
Gamakatsu, the innovation leader in fish hooks, is launching Nano Alpha technology in 2024. Nano Alpha is a new finish available on Gamakatsu's most popular hook styles. It delivers 2 times slicker performance, 4 times better corrosion resistance. Nano Alpha technology makes the world's greatest fish hooks even better in 2024 to help anglers catch more fish.
Born in Japan, using technology, innovation, and precision, Sunline produces the widest selection of fishing lines at the most technologically advanced line factory in the world. Manufactured at the strictest tolerances to produce victories at the highest levels of tournament bass fishing. From household names like Christie, Swindle, and Cruz, to young guns like Cook, Logan, New, and Welcher, they all trust Sunline to take them to the top of the leaderboard. Choose the line that will give you the strength to guarantee your confidence. Sunline.
It's definitely a lot colder today.
Man, I really need to make this cut. I need to make up points quick.
Positive mental attitude.
I hope they stay where I found them.
Are they even pulling water?
Too far.
I hope nobody else.
Man, it's too windy.
The water's too high.
Avco, keeping you comfortable on the outside, no matter how you're feeling on the inside.
Welcome back. Talking with Gene Gilliland, B.A.S.S Conservation Director and Hall of Fame inductee. There's a lot of people that you talk about too, that it's not like super sexy to talk about this type of stuff and hard to get people active. Well, let's go to something that everybody gets fired up, which is conservation grants and scholarships. But this is another one, like we were talking during the air. It's like important topics that if it resonates with just a couple people or one people, or it makes a difference, the snowball effect is massive. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah. Well, and a while ago we're talking about getting involved.
Yeah.
Well, now we're going to talk about how people can get out there and get their hands dirty.
Yeah. Because there's plenty of opportunity.
And there's ways to provide money to do projects that can make a difference on their lake or river or reservoir, whatever. So yeah, there are opportunities out there if people. And
we touched on this a little bit last time, but just go ahead and dive into them. Do you want me to pull up that email that you sent me? There was all sorts of cool projects on there. Were those not out? Don't put those out yet. This was that Word document that you sent me.
Yeah.
With like what they're doing, what everyone's doing.
That's going all the way. That's the history of the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame raises money every year through our auction and the induction banquet to do things for the betterment of the bass fishing.
Like when what do I got going on?
It's a
like when someone paid $17,000 to fish with Milliken, part of that goes to
right. So obviously there's the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame, the physical space in Wonders of Wildlife Museum, which we provide funding to do things there. But two of the other things that we do are use that money to help make bass fishing better. And we have a conservation grant program that was started in 2020. And so we've had 4 years of it now.
Yep.
And we've given out, where's my totals here? We've given out $67,000 in grant money to, I think it's been spread out over about a dozen different states, but it's money that is available to individual bass clubs. High school fishing teams can apply for it, lake associations, state agencies. It's money that was that was raised during the Hall of Fame auction and banquet and the things that we do during the course of the year. And then we're turning around and giving some of that money back to try to make bass fishing better.
All sorts of stuff. Here's a Clarksville fishing team, Illinois Bass Nation, Virginia Bass Federation, Southwest Iowa fishing team, Kentucky Bass Nation, Georgia, Leavenworth Bassmasters, Michigan DNR, Brunswick Academy. I'm just naming a few of them. It's all over the map of different organizations.
Right. So every year we put out a request for proposals around the first of the year. And any organization that has some connection to bass fishing is eligible to apply for these grant funds. It's not a huge amount of money per grant. It's like $5,000 to $7,000 is kind of where we've settled on the amount. That way we can kind of spread the love. We typically have tried to give out about $25,000 or $30,000 a year to these various projects. And most of the projects, I would say, are related to fish habitat enhancement, whether it's sinking brush piles or maybe it's artificial habitat, things like mossback attractors or Georgia cubes or whatever. A lot of it has involved youth organizations, the high school fishing teams, getting the kids out there and helping to build these things and sink things in the lake. But we have funded projects on some lake cleanup things, some things looking at invasive species prevention. We've looked at, we actually had one project that was a bass stocking project. And then we talked about how that doesn't work. But in this case, it's a very special situation after they had some salt water get into it was in the Chesapeake Bay, and they had a big fish kill. And so you're kind of starting over.
That's why I didn't catch him in the open.
And so
I knew it had to be something.
So that, it's a special situation. But anyway, it's the cool thing about these grants is that $5,000 by itself might not go very far. But so if people have got a dream of doing a really cool project, whether it's artificial habitat or planting aquatic vegetation.
I'm seeing cypress trees. I'm seeing water willow. I'm seeing habitat enhancement.
But if you'll look at and I don't know what you've got on the screen there, but each of these organizations finds other partners who bring money to the table. So the $5,000 that we may have given to, say, the Tennessee Bass Nation high school program, they started partnering with...
Can I show this Word doc that you sent?
Sure,
okay.
sure.
I just didn't know.
With Tennessee Wildlife and TVA. And next thing you know, they've got $25,000 to work with.
Yep.
Now they can really do a much bigger project. And what's happened over the past several years is that $67,000 that the Hall of Fame provided
turns into,
there's $160,000 worth of other money that came in from other sources. So now we've got $250,000 that has been spread around doing these projects. And that's what we really try to encourage. Just like I said a while ago, you want that seat at the table to make sure you're there when decisions are made. But that also, when you got that seat at the table, it also allows you to help build partnerships. And now it's not just your bass club that's trying to raise money. Now you've got the Lake Association, you've got the local state fish and game agency, you've got other businesses that, just people that want to support bass fishing and donate materials. It doesn't have to be money. A lot of times you do a habitat project where you're sinking brush piles. Well, you got to have anchors. Okay. Now you get a concrete company to donate concrete blocks or, things like that. A lot of times we're kind of looking at other partners to provide not just cash, but services. Maybe they donate the use of a bulldozer or a track hoe to help, when you're building something. So it really can be seed money in a lot of cases to really get some cool projects. And any organization that wants to do something for their lake or river or reservoir related to bass fishing is eligible to send in a proposal. They don't have to be a B.A.S.S club or a TBF club or a certain high school fishing program. And like this past year, Michigan DNR submitted a proposal. It's the first one we've had from a state agency. And what they were doing was they put radio transmitters in smallmouth bass in Lake St. Clair.
Is that why the word radio telemetry is on here? Okay,
radio telemetry. They implanted transmitters in smallmouth bass in Lake St. Clair, and the Hall of Fame bought a whole bunch of those transmitters and donated them to Michigan DNR for that project. And then at the Bassmaster Elite tournament at Lake St. Clair back in whenever that was, August, we actually used tournament caught fish that they implanted with these transmitters and then released those fish with the transmitters that the Hall of Fame had purchased.
That's cool.
And so it,
so where can we see how is there anywhere public to see what those things did?
They haven't got to the point of having results yet, because this was just last summer, and they're implanting more and more fish even this spring. There's a whole series of receivers all over the Great Lakes, and every time a fish with a transmitter swims by one of those things, it pings it.
So I could catch one of those in the Open coming up in July on St. Clair. I could catch a smallmouth that has a transmitter in it.
And I'll tell you, there's an article that I wrote just a couple of weeks ago on Bassmaster.com. They implanted a bunch of more smallmouth just a few weeks ago on St. Clair. I caught one of those fish when we were at St. Clair fishing 4 days after this fish had surgery and had this transmitter implanted into it.
No, that's not true. You all know if you catch a smallmouth, it swims to the bottom and dies, Gene.
And, you can tell them because they've got a little yellow streamer tag sticking out of them. And this one, you could see the little sutures in his belly where they.
And here it is right here. I've got the January article, Pro Anglers Help DNR with Lake St. Clair Smallmouth Bass Research.
And so
you caught were you was that over the moon?
Oh yeah. It kind of was a slow day, and I caught this fish with the transmitter in it.
How big was it?
It was 4.4.
Oh, so it was a good one.
Yeah.
Did it fight?
Oh yeah. Yeah. He'd gone back to doing regular smallmouth things. And the crazy thing is that same fish was caught a week later by somebody else.
What a dumbass.
Well, yeah. But But to me, it says, okay, this process is working. They're putting these transmitters in. The fish are surviving. They're out there going back to doing smallmouth things, and at some point they're going to have some really cool data from this. Ohio DNR has been doing the same thing on Lake Erie.
Someone's going to catch one in that Open coming.
They've got some. I guarantee it. They've got hundreds of them out there.
How much does it weigh?
How much
does a transmitter weigh? I don't want to lose by an ounce because someone weighs in a transmitter.
No, they're a lot less than that.
I know, I'm just kidding.
But
will you know? Like, is there a sting sticking out of it?
There's a little yellow streamer tag sticking out of the fish. That's how it's real obvious. It's about 3 inches long, bright yellow little streamer tag, little spaghetti piece sticking out of them. And
that's a big lake, though. The odds of catching one of those are pretty.
I don't know.
But you did.
I don't know. I caught
4 days later.
4 days later, and they've, like I say, they have tagged.
Where is this? Or what? Do you remember the title of the article? I want to pull it up here that you did. Is it on Bassmaster?
Yeah. The one that I wrote was just like about a week ago. But anyway, it's but that's the kind of thing that the Hall of Fame grants can go for. It doesn't have to be a bass club. It's really cool. We really like to see high school kids getting involved with these projects because it kind of helps teach them a little bit about giving back to the resource that it's not all about winning the tournament. It's about taking care of the fishery and putting in habitat, whether it's planting aquatic plants or putting in artificial structures, that sort of thing. It really helps, I think, get those kids kind of tuned into protecting their future fishing and being connected with whatever lakes it is that they're working on. And that's one of the, when we're scoring these proposals, like this year we got, I think for 2024, for this year, we got 19 proposals that came in. And our team is, I think, probably within about a week of being ready to announce the winners for this year. And we'll be getting checks written to those winners. But at our board meeting next week, we'll decide, which ones are worthy and how much money we're going to give them. People will, in their proposals, sometimes they ask for $2,000. Sometimes they ask for $20,000. So we have to kind of decide, well, we've only got $25,000 total. How are we going to split this up? And which ones of these projects seem to be the most worthy? We have given some to the same groups like 2 or 3 years in a row because they've done such a great job. The other thing that we tie into this, at least from the B.A.S.S. side, the Bass Nation, we have a grant program with AFTCO, and AFTCO provides $20,000 or $30,000 a year for a very similar program, but it's only available to Bass Nation affiliated clubs or state chapters. But some of them have gotten both. They've gotten $5,000 from the AFTCO Bass Nation grants and $5,000 from the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame. So now they got $10,000 to work with. And so they've been able to ramp up and do bigger and better projects. So it's expanding. I am going to really try to lobby with our board to put more money into it.
It's one of the 4 core initiatives of the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Pioneering efforts in the realm of conservation. I've had this. I've had the mission page pulled up while you've been talking about it. But pioneering efforts in the realm of conservation with ongoing initiatives aimed at protecting bass fishing habitats and ecosystems. It's one of the 4 core initiatives of the existence of the Hall of Fame.
So I'm really excited that it's been a very successful program. I hope we can grow it. Obviously, the amount of money that we have to put into this is directly related to how well things go at our banquets and auctions and that sort of thing in terms of fundraising.
And you have months to get ready for this because it'll open up again towards the end of the beginning of 2025. Right. If you want to have get a grant in to do something in 2025.
And I would think this is not too early to start planning, to start making those connections with your state Fish and Wildlife Agency, with other partners. Try to figure out, okay, where are we going to find all the money we need? And where are we going to find all the bodies to do the work so we can mobilize our labor? And so it's certainly not too early now to start that process so that when the application period opens up, you're ready to go. And it's an online thing that's on the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame website. It's fill in the blanks. It's really easy to fill in I
think we showed that last time. I got it pulled up now.
And so it's there's nothing to it. And if you're a Bass Nation club, the AFTCO Bass Nation grant program will be announced about the same time next year. And again, they're pretty much identical, and you can apply for both of them. The other thing that we have started this past year, which is brand new, is the scholarship program. Several years ago, Bass and Shimano had a scholarship program that we did for 3, 4, 5 years, I guess. And the reason that was started was that a lot of state agencies are having a hard time finding biologists, students coming out of college that are anglers and know the biology. They're finding a lot of students coming out of college that know the science, but they don't know fishing. They're not anglers. And so they have a real hard time sometimes connecting with their customers. And so we started this scholarship program to try to encourage students who were already anglers who wanted to study natural resources conservation. And Shimano did that for several years. And then things changed at Shimano and they dropped the program. So we kind of picked it up at the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame. And so the idea is that we want to reward students with some scholarship money if they are studying to become fish biologists, fish managers, and become a practicing biologist with a state or federal agency. If they want to become a college professor, they're out. If they want to do pure research in a laboratory that really doesn't relate to bass fishing, they're out. We want students that want to be on the ground fish biologists that are going to help make bass fishing better. And so we set up this scholarship program. Last year in 23, we had 39 applicants, and we gave 10 of them $2,500 scholarships that they can use for books or tuition or meals or whatever. This year we had over 40 applicants, and I'm waiting to get all of the scores back from my panel of judges to see how many qualified applicants we're going to have this year and how many scholarships we'll be able to give away. But I think it's just talking to state fish chiefs, like at our conservation summit, and they moan about how hard it is to find good qualified applicants for some of their biologist positions that understand the sport of fishing. And that's what this scholarship is all about, is try to encourage those students to get their degrees in fish and wildlife management and eventually, become practicing biologists. And I will say that when Shimano was doing that program, a lot of the ones that we gave scholarships to wound up being practicing fish managers. It was really good. I was
pulling up that interview that's on the HOF site with Natalie
Kosh.
Yeah, She was talking about what she's doing, and you can tell she fishes just by the way she holds her largemouth. You know what I mean? Like she wasn't like, she's like, she's caught a few largemouth in her day.
Yeah, and it's really nice to be able to reward some of those students. Most of the time, and it's open to high school kids that are going into college, as long as they're professing that they want to become a fish manager. It's open to undergraduates, and it's open to graduate students that are working on master's degrees, that sort of thing. Yeah. So it's pretty
another
broad.
Initiative of the Hall of Fame is empowering the next generation, supporting their pursuit in fisheries management, education, and career aspirations.
Yep. It's a good deal. And, if anybody out there knows students that are majoring in fish and wildlife management, we'll be announcing that again for 2025, sometime around the end of the year. And all of these announcements will be on the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame website,
bassfishinghof.com.
And we will push those out on social media, and we announce it on bassmaster.com. And on the scholarship stuff, I send it to the American Fisheries Society and to a gazillion college professors, and so that they can help spread the word.
We gotta go back to this thing that you caught. I got the picture pulled up. They literally like unzip it and then stitch it back together.
Exactly.
Like, it's literally like like the dude was just in the ER and it's sticking out like right above his butt. There's like a 3-inch green thing sticking out.
Yeah. The little spaghetti tag.
Yeah, dude, that was a beefy fish too.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
Yeah. The transmitter itself is probably about that big.
Half your pinky.
Yeah. About that big around.
I mean, they literally like
over an inch long.
Cut it and then suture it.
Correct.
And 4 days later, he was just chomping.
Yeah.
What'd you catch him
on? Lipless crankbait.
Oh, so he was up there chewing.
He was eating.
Oh, yeah. He was chasing it down and eating it.
Yeah.
It wasn't like you were doodle socking them with a.
No. And that's, when they catch these fish, like the one, for example, when we did the implant work during the elite tournament, they bring the fish in. One of the cool things about, and you're familiar with Bass Track.
Oh yeah.
So at our elite tournaments, the observer or the cameraman, somebody that's in the boat, when they enter the weight of a fish for Bass Track, it geo-references that. We know we have a GPS coordinate of where that fish was caught. So over the course of the day, we were able to look at that information and find out, okay, where are some fish being caught in different parts of Lake St. Clair? So when that angler came in from the north end or the south end or over on the Canadian side or wherever, we could say, okay, we want his fish. So when he comes off stage after he's weighed his fish, then they bring those fish back they had a little tent set up backstage, and they let them recuperate for a little while. And then they have a special little device that sort of tranquilizes the fish for a little while. They roll them over on their back, and they've got a little tube that flushes water through their gills. So they're getting fresh oxygenated water, and they do this surgery. Basically, they cut a little incision about maybe an inch long and poke this little transmitter into the body cavity, and then they stitch them up, and then they poke that little yellow spaghetti tag in as a visual thing, so that anglers are real obvious that it's a tagged
don't
fish.
Yank it out.
Yeah, because the incision eventually a lot of that'll heal up, and the suture material will dissolve away. But the little yellow tag is going to always.
Yeah, I've caught some old gnarly tags in fish.
And, they get algae grow all over
5 years ago from a research project.
Yeah. But you scrape all that stuff off, and there's a phone number on there. And what they want you to do is report the tag is my fish was number 47 or something. I don't remember the number, but you tell them what the tag number was, where you caught it, how big it was, that sort of thing. There's a place on their website where you can report this information. And what you get back then is a letter or an email from DNR that says, hey, your fish was tagged this date and it weighed this much, and here's where we tagged it. So you got an idea.
Your letter was like, hey, your fish was tagged 4 days ago, right?
Yeah.
It weighed the exact same.
Right. And so it gives you a little information about what's happened to that
that'd be
fish.
A cool letter to have on the wall of the studio, and you're like, oh yeah, that's when I caught the tagged fish.
Yeah.
Yada yada.
And eventually they build a library of information about where these fish are going, different times of the year. In our case, they were tournament released fish. What happens to them? Do they spread out?
So you want to know if a fish that was caught way the hell over in Canada or whatever, and then gets released in the Bass Live release boat. You're doing the same thing. They're doing the same thing, kind of what you did on Thunderbird back in the day, where you would say, where'd you catch these fish? You put them in and see if they go back up the little river, or whether they stay at the ramp, whether they go to a brush pile in the next cove.
And one of the things that they're looking at specifically at St. Clair is, they've been tagging fish with these little metal jaw tags for years.
And I showed a picture of that earlier.
They hardly ever see any of those fish on the Canadian side of the shipping channel. And so they're wondering, okay, do our fish just not swim over there?
Is there like
do
a imaginary something where they don't want to swim across the shipping
or do they
channel?
just live their whole lives in Anchor Bay or the Mile Roads or whatever part of St. Clair? So we were able to get fish from different parts of the lake.
See if they go home.
So now we can see if they go home.
That was a big deal with what's going on at Leech, isn't it? With bringing the open up there as far as moving smallmouth around the fishery, because the smallmouth, they're like kind of an enigma in that thing. And it was only thought that they lived in certain parts of the lake, but now there's data coming in that's showing that they are distributed, so that like having an open or something there isn't going to totally jack. Am I somewhat along the lines of what I've heard some of the Minnesota guys talking about?
That's a lot of what these studies are trying to do is figure out. From DNR standpoint, they're trying to figure out, okay, if fish are being redistributed because of tournament, relocating them to certain areas, do they go back home or do they just spread out sort of at random? But the other part of that is, if they don't ever go to Canada, does that mean you have kind of separate like subpopulations, like
cities like New York and Philly, where the fish is like, no, I'm a New York fish.
Right.
I'm not going to go
Anchor
to Philly.
Bay. Those fish live their whole lives within a certain number of square miles. And then this population, and they don't do a lot of mixing, whereas some studies especially on river smallmouth show that they'll swim 30, 40 miles, and get all kinds of mixing between different parts of the lake or the river. So there's a lot of questions that this kind of study can answer that ultimately could, affect management of that fish population and how they manage those fish, and whether or not there's, a need for any sort of regulations that would, prevent damage to the population.
You heard what's been going on in Tennessee with the MPFL and fish transportation? I'll talk to you about off air about that. It's pretty interesting. It would interest you, Gene.
Okay.
They're running into
a teaser.
They're running into some issues over there.
Yeah.
I guess there's been some turnover or some changing, some new stuff going on over there.
Well,
people anyway. Long story short, we'll talk about it on the boat while we're finesse fishing.
Well, the Alabama bass has changed a lot of things. In
that I believe has something to do with it.
That's going to impact a lot of how people do business, and
I think they might be running
southeastern
into
states.
Got a couple of calls from concerned National Professional Fishing League anglers. Like, what can you do about this? Nothing. It's interesting though. Let me know what's up.
Yeah. Well, we'll dive into it.
Okay. What else? Because I want to definitely get to the grads and dads auction that's open for the next couple days. So I will have this link. It's a sneaky link, folks, but I will have this link in the YouTube description of the show if you guys are looking for something for your dad or your grad, with the proceeds going to the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame.
And those things help fund our conservation grants and scholarships.
When's that open till?
I believe it's open till the 6th, which is 2 days from now.
I've got it pulled up right now. It's a bid pal deal. It's the same thing. Friday. If you guys have bid on auction items in the past, we had the auction winner come co-host a show. He actually could be like a viable co-host for the show. He did a hell of a job.
I remember that. Yeah.
I still talk to him all the time. And then we went out and we caught 25 pounds, but I need to get him back on the show. But that was that, but all sorts of just kind of like a mid auction in between the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame auction, which will be in that September time frame, where you have all the trips and stuff, but some really cool stuff up here. I've got it pulled up. Jason Christie's Summer Sizzlers 50+ lure kit. You got Blaylocks, Luke Palmer stuff. You've got all sorts of signed jerseys from Adrian Avina, Cliff Crochet, Boyd Duckett. Right now, that's only $100. Scott Suggs, JVD, all sorts of cool stuff. I was a big fan of the neon sign, Bass Fishing Hall of Fame neon signs, lithium batteries, Sunline stuff, autograph crankbaits, power poles, This one's cool. The Brandon Polinick signed Mega Bass. That'd make a nice addition. So a lot of kind of looking for a goal here, and are just shy of the goal right now.
Right. We do two little, I say little auctions. The big auction is at the banquet and the induction ceremony in September, which is the 26th of September.
Which you can go to. I've made that. I talk about that on the show all the time. If you are looking for a weekend trip,
buy a ticket. Yep.
That is a freaking awesome trip.
Yeah, it is.
Especially with with the induction ceremony this year.
Year's going to be crazy.
Dude. Like, I would love to see a bunch of BTLers that come. I mean, you dress up nice, you get the dinner. I mean, everybody and anybody in bass fishing is at that thing. You will get to see the legends, the current Hall of Famers, like Gene in your blue jacket. I mean, from Larry Nixon, Iconelli, there'll be Skeet, Zona, Van Dam, everybody's there. They do like a live auction element, another auction, like the Wonders of Wildlife is right there. You can go do Bass Pro, the Wonders of Wildlife, the Natural History Museum one day. Then you can go do the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame banquet the next day. I didn't even know it was public till a couple years ago when I was down talking to people, and they're like, oh, we just get tickets for it. And I was like, really?
Yeah.
I was like, dude, this thing, should be sold out like that.
And don't plan on one day.
No, that's what I said. It's a weekend deal. Can you bring kids, or is it a no kids deal?
No, there's kids coming.
There are. You can?
Yeah.
What is it? How much is it? I've got it. 25. I don't want to say this. Hold on. Let me get back to
the price of a ticket.
Yeah.
No, it's
more than
I want to say it's $125.
Yeah. Here it is, right here.
150 maybe. I don't remember. But again,
$150 a ticket.
That goes towards, paying for the banquet and for the.
You can buy a table for $1,000.
Yeah.
You can buy a table with premium seating for. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Just buy a table with your buddies for $1,000. Go down there, get a guide, and go catch some trout one day.
Yeah.
Go do Bass Pro Shops one day. Knock it off with the Hall of Fame banquet.
I've got some friends that live in the St. Louis area that come down every year just for the auction because of the deals.
Yeah.
And but we have two little auctions during the course of the year. We have one at the Red Crest and one around the Bassmaster Classic, and those were little small auctions. This one, the Dads and Grads one, is kind of the one that was going to be done at the Classic, but they kind of held it off a little bit. And those are really just to help kind of promote the Hall of Fame at those two big events at Red Crest and the Classic. But then the big auction is in the banquet, and the induction ceremony is the one in September. So it's a really I've just fallen in love with the Hall of Fame as a way to help preserve the sport from not just from the fishing standpoint, but from the history of the sport. And I guess that's, as I get older, the nostalgia and the history of things, when you guys were talking yesterday or a couple of days ago about the in fishermen, and then when you and Charlie Hartley were talking about some of the old reels.
Dude,
and
wasn't that cool?
Stuff like that.
I had like a bunch of I had 3 listeners send me emails that were like, hey, here's the Mitchell 3000 that I learned to fish with, and I've still got it.
Yeah. And you start thinking, as I guess you get a little bit older, you think about some of those things. And there's a handful of us in the Hall of Fame on the board that are really, really looking at trying to do more to tell the story of the history of bass fishing. Yes, we want to celebrate all of the people that are within the hall, and we want to do things to preserve the sport and the conservation efforts. But a lot of it, that history is being lost.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think as the founding fathers of the sport of bass fishing sadly are dying away. And, a lot of the younger generation anglers may not even know the contributions that those people made that are allowing them to do the sport the way they're doing it now. And so I think that's important.
They should? Like, what is your your thought on that. Should there have to be, hey, you've made the Elite Series, you're going to this weekend crash course of what is expected of you. Here's the history of it. Here's how it all went down. Here's why we do what we do with this. And that way, when you're in front of media, you at least are given the opportunity to have an understanding and a respect for why it came from, why they do what they do, and could prevent some awkward situations in public appearances, perhaps.
I think that's,
or is
probably,
that just
no,
society and everything?
I don't know that's probably not a bad idea. I don't know that, they'd have to have a test when it's all over with, that we're not going to grade you.
Yeah,
on,
but
but just expose people
congrats,
to
you're on the Elite Series. Come to Little Rock for the weekend.
Yeah.
We'll get to know you. We'll have Gene come in and talk about conservation and why, hey, in your YouTube videos, that fish is going to live if you freaking throw him 5 feet in the air when you cull him, because by God, we release brook trout out of airplanes in the mountains if Utah and they survive. But, optics wise, that type of stuff, and hook removal and fizzing. And then you have a guy come in and you give a little 3-hour presentation of like, hey, this is Ray Scott. He wore a cowboy hat. He started out selling newspapers down on Toomer's Corner in Auburn. Then he was an insurance salesman. He started the blah, blah, blah. These are the founding. This is Bob Cobb. This is, it started this at Tulsa B.A.S.S. This is the All-American. I mean, it's pretty easy right there. Hey, now you kind of get an understanding that this isn't like the end all be all. Like, this only been around since 2006 with the inaugural Elite Series.
Yeah.
Here's the Hall of Fame, blah, blah, blah. That would be a valuable day, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the things we're going to try to do in the Hall of Fame is have a timeline. That's kind of the history of bass fishing. And that's something we're working on right now. We've got some new space that Johnny Morris has made available to the Hall of Fame. We've expanded the space. If people have been there, it's different now. We've got more room, and we're trying to fill that room. And part of that is going to be something that has a kind of a history of the sport and a lot of those milestone events that have come along over the years. And, I think that's certainly something that everybody needs to be aware of is where we came from.
Do you know who Lynn Dollar is, personally, the guy who's got the archive on YouTube?
We met. Yeah.
So you've met the guy?
Yeah.
How did he get all those videos?
I don't know. I don't have any idea.
Is he cool dude? Is he his story? I would.
Yeah.
How old is he?
Probably my age.
You think he come on BTO? You guys contact info?
I don't know. I'd have to look.
You think we could maybe get that somehow?
Probably so.
I'd like to get him on. I mean, I brought it up. Everyone's talking on here, talking about the history of it. Mm-hmm. I got a lot of BTL listeners that have watched everything, had been around for a long time, and they're like, dude, you have no idea. We all give Lynn Dollar hundreds of views. I do too. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I can't sleep and I just pull up, 1992 Bugs Island,
Yeah.
Throwing a Colorado spinner blade on a 5'5" pistol grip.
Right.
Kevin Van Dam is targeting the shad spawn. That type of stuff.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Oh, we'll see if we can make a connection there.
Yeah. People are saying, bring them on, bring them on, bring them on. Everyone's saying, bring them on. Yeah, we need to do a Lynn Dollar show. I've kind of said screw it the last couple of weeks, Gene. And if I find it interesting, I want to talk about old reels. I want to talk about in fishermen. I want to talk about conservation. I'm doing it.
Well, that's good.
It's been receptive really well, too.
That's good. And I appreciate you having me on because we don't get.
Well, I know you're passionate about it.
We don't get a lot of airtime for some of these topics. Is
there anything else you want airtime about?
No. There's just 10 million things we could go down, rabbit holes we could go down.
Okay.
But
well, I do a show every day. So, I mean, I'm just saying,
I
got no problem. Anytime you want to come in, if you got something you want to talk about for an hour, like I said, people don't have to sit there and listen to it, but there are thousands of people that will listen to it. And it's not like I just throw you on for an hour.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the beauty of it. You're half an hour from my door.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I enjoy it.
Good. Well, I appreciate it.
I appreciate it too. I mean, I feel like I've, as I get older too, but just growing up, one of the first people I met through Mark Jeffries was you. and then rolling with Harold Allen for so long. I developed a relationship in my early 20s with a lot of the old grizzled veterans. So, I heard those old war stories and conversations from them about it. So I've got a unique, I think, kind of in this appreciation for the history, for the conservation side, for understanding how to have a healthy organization. You have to have a lot of elements that are working together. The biggest, in my opinion, is the history of the sport, because the history of the sport is what makes it so valuable, respected, and hallowed. It's the 50 plus years of the Bassmaster Classic, with Jim Bitter losing the fish over the side, and Takahiro catching 3 fish on the last 5 casts, and Chris Lane kneeling on a 1 foot, and Paul Elias winning an 82 on the kneel. And like, it's all those things that make it what the Bassmaster Classic is, and why you can't just have another tournament and say, hey, it's the biggest in the world. Well, yeah, you can pay the most and you can say it's the biggest, but it's the history that makes it valuable. And then the conservation side of it as well, because that is a massive part of Bass. And what Ray wanted it to be, and what the founding people of Bass wanted it to be, was not only viable tournaments where when you come in and weigh in, you're not getting beat by a dude with a frozen bass. I mean, am I everything I'm saying valid here, Gene?
Yeah.
And then the other part of it was safety, the kill switch, and then the other and horsepower limitations, and keeping as safe as possible, which, I mean, Ray developed after he almost got swamped during shotgun starts. And then the third of it is the conservation, the live wells, the catch and release, the don't kill your catch stuff, the fish more, like all of that is all part of what Bassmaster is, which is something that I'm very passionate about. Like I said, as being a life member since I was 13 years old. So I think it's all just as important as, having Patrick Walters on talking about it was burning a chartreuse fluke. It's just as important to have you on talking about the grants and the conservation and how the history works in the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame, and then to have all the other elements of it.
The whole package. I appreciate it too.
Are you genuinely excited about going to throw a spinning rod in cloudy, overcast conditions?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
All right, guys. Greatly appreciate it. All right. Big show tomorrow. I'm working on a morning show, but right now we're trending towards a 12 p.m. show. Teaming up with Omnia and Omnia Pro. They are running a contest right now on omniafishing.com where you can fish against Seth Fighter. If you're an Omnia Pro member, it doubles the prizes you can win. Go to omniafishing.com/Bass Talk Live or /BTL. It's got all the info up on there. You can also get a 40% off of your Omnia Pro membership, but it like runs for a month. It's been running for 2 weeks. It runs like 2 weeks after this. But tomorrow, Seth Fighter will be live on Mille Lacs, and from 12 to 2, we'll be simul streaming on BTL and on Omnia Fishing's YouTube channel. And I'm going to be hosting it. We're going to bring in Polish Pete, a number of different guests, and then Seth is going to be live for those 2 hours. You can get on the Omnia page, you can get on BTL, you can ask Seth questions. He's going to have someone in the boat that'll be able to relay those questions, and then he's going to see how many total inches, I would assume, of smallmouth. Oh no, it's Seth. He might be up there jacking largemouth on Mille Lacs. He might throw us for a curve. And then if you beat him, you can win great prizes. If you register, it's free to register as well. Over at Omnia. So tomorrow, noon Central Time, BTL, Omnia, YouTube. I'll do a Instagram post about it after Gene and I are done casting, catching, counting, and mounting. Sound good?
Sounds like a plan.
All right. This has been another edition of BTL Bass Talk Live. We will talk to everybody tomorrow. Thanks, Gene. That was a long show. That was a good show, though. Information packed.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Later.